Alright, so I thought that I would bring up two drawings by John Buscema. Um, these would have appeared probably in Conan. He was the major artist for Conan with Marvel Comics. And I just like the way he draws. So I wanted to find some of his work. You could see there's objectification in these drawings, but when you look at Conan, there's objectification there too. So it's pretty much equal time when it comes to superheroes. All the forms are objectified. You know, they're wearing skin tight suits and everything shows. Especially with Conan, when he really just wears boots and kind of like a bearskin loincloth or something like that, like Tarzan. But the difference is that in the Conan stories, uh, it is very sexist stories or portrayals. So that's where the difference shows up. Um, so anyway, I only talk about that just so that we don't go into this blindly thinking that this is, you may want to consider the way you depict the figure, male or female. And so that's not something that I really talk about in this class, but at the same time, it's something we should always be aware of as we're drawing these figures. So anyway, as you can see, he really focuses on the contours. There's a graceful contour, um, and there's a certain rhythm. For example, this figure right here, this profile up high is here, and then the hip, it comes down under the body like that. And so from here it just drops straight mostly, and then from up here it kind of moves up straight. So it's this thrust of the rib cage to the hip here that is what's happening, and it's really kind of doing the same thing here. The difference is this is still the weight bearing leg right here, that's pushing the hip up, and then this one is dropping, this leg is dropping. But in this first photo drawing, sorry, he's got the leg behind. In this front one, he's got the leg forward. So that's the only difference. It's still that there's this push up on this hip right here. Rib cage. External oblique, rib cage, rib cage. He covers what's going on here, but it's something like that. He's got the rib cage coming up here. Then you have the gluteus medius kind of formed to the hips. And then you'd want this to be at the same place, basically. It really, yeah, you think about the breasts as forms, but um, generally I would probably, at least when I sculpt, all right, I might think about, he doesn't so much as but I might think about the pectoralis forms first. how they come off the clavicle, the deltoids, biceps. Yeah, so I think about that first, and then I might really kind of put the breast forms over there. But you can see over here, he's got the pectoralis references. Not so much here, but it's there. So let's go into this a little bit. Which color is going to work? Let's pick a warm color, I guess. So again, we look for the rib cage. He's pretty much got it, and the base of the sternum is right up here. This is the pit of the neck, so that's the sternum right there. And I don't know how else to say that that's the base of the sternum. It's just, there was a certain landmark, so I probably we should go over that when we make the models and everything. So this is the rib cage, pretty small rib cage, really. And then you have the pubic symphysis is right here. This looks like it might be a reference to the anterior superior iliac spine. So this would be the lower abdominal coming here. The hip might be at the base, you know, if this is the gluteus medius profile right here. Gluteus medius, and then the thrust right here. So that's the hip. That's the hip right there. And that tilt would parallel this tilt, you know, that's implied here. I guess this is the navel, which that would mostly mean that the pelvic crests come up about that high. So the Mickey Mouse ears come up that high. And that might be the pelvis as we see it underneath it. I hope you can see that. So here's the patellar ligament is kind of doing the thing here. So this is probably mostly the patella right here. And if this is the hip, that's the femur. And this profile will be the soleus. Tibialis anterior comes in here. This is the shin. Medial malleolus, tibia, fibula right up over here. Let's see, this would be this looks like it's kind of the quadriceps tendon right here. Vastus lateralis coming into it. So the knee patella is probably right here. He's kind of got this line right here that's following the peak of the rectus femoris and the vastus medialis. So that's right here. Those are quadriceps muscles right there. And then the tendons right here. Tibialis anterior is right here. Soleus. I hope you can see all that. Right up here is the upper portion, the top portion of the abdominals. coming over that thoracic arch. And then down below right here is the next part. This part right here is the lowest. And then you have this connection here. So let me see if I could do that again. I think I mentioned before, I used to sit down with an artist, fashion illustrator in New York City when I was about 20. And he would be doing illustrations for different magazines, Interview magazine or Advertisement or whatever. And he'd let me draw with him. He'd have models in the studio. And I watched the way he laid down a line and what he did, and I just drew the same way. I kept it in my head, you know. And I find myself to this day putting lines down the way I remember him doing it. Now, is it exactly? No, but it's definitely the way I remember it, which could be an incorrect memory, but it's still based on that experience. All right, so the rib cage does this. We've got that abdominal section that comes across the top. He dips it down to soften up that arch, and then the next abdominal portion basically comes across the bottom of the rib cage. It's connected. This fills out the rib cage form. So you think of this section and this section of the abdominals are very much tied to the rib cage. So whatever the turn the rib cage does, this is going to be exactly the same no matter what the movement is, for the most part. So now we have the pelvis down here. I don't want to get too detailed with the pelvis. This is the lower abdominal. You can connecting these 3 points always. And then he's got the navel up. It's pretty high because the crest. He has the crest coming up high. I mean, it's pretty accurate. So that's the top of the lower abdominal. And then you're connecting this abdominal to this abdominal. All right, external obliques would be right here. So we talk about the six-pack for abdominals, and usually people are talking about the lower three. They're not talking about the one that goes on the rib cage, basically right below the pectoralis. They're talking about these 3 pairs right here, right? All right, so let's go into this one. Let's change it back to red, I guess. I don't know. There's a dark red, maybe. All right, so it's really the same thing. It's just going through the same thing. I think that you get a better sense that the sternum is right here. Bottom of the rib cage would be pretty much here. He's referencing it. It's the floating ribs, and it's in there. It's not like it's at the surface. Usually you just see the part that you see is not the bottom of the rib cage. So you always have to remember to bring that rib cage down, lower than the way we see it projected. And this is where he would basically have the anterior superior iliac spine, because that's the external oblique form there, and then the gluteus medius right here. So you got the legs, they do this, right? So your pubic tubercle's probably right about there, and below that would be the genitalia. The comes down a little bit lower below that form there. So looks like he might have a reference here to the upper abdominal portion. It's subtle, but it's there. We'll make it solid so we don't get confused. The lower abdominal with the navel comes down here, and then basically at the bottom of the rib cage it just fills it in. It comes straight across basically, and then you're connecting I hope that helps. Let's do this over. Let's talk about some things, other things. All right. So what you would do is you might start out by drawing all the anatomy, you know, like the bones. And you know, on a male figure you could leave all the anatomy in. As an athlete who's in action, basically, because if you take a bodybuilder and he's not in action, you're not going to see all the definition. But you can get away with depicting a male that way. With a female, that's your call. But I might start out with all the anatomy. Looks like I'm really kind of not, let's see, I'm kind of messing this up. It's horrible. Let's just go through it anyway. So you start out with all the anatomy. And just so you know where everything is. And then you could go back into it and pick and choose what lines you really want to focus on. You know, what lines make the most sense to you. And this is what they all do. You know, they pencil it first and then they ink it. A lot of times the inking is done by somebody else and they ruin it, in my opinion. Oftentimes, you know, they ruin it. But if you look at John Buscema's drawings, like pencil drawings, he's got rough sketches first that he does, thumbnails, and then he'll do something a little more refined. Like this one on this over here is more like what his original drawings might look like. This would be the next step right here, this middle one, where the lines become more less short and broken. They become a little bit more, as through the progress, like as it gets inked, they become more fluid. So anyway, I hope this helps.